a motivational speaker, and an author of A Chance in the World. He currently serves as the Chief Diversity Officer and Divisional Vice President for Walgreens, the first person to occupy this role in the historic company's century-long history. He is widely recognized as one of America's most innovative leaders on matters of diversity and inclusion, emphasizing the importance of next practices. Steve's perspective on differences and adversity comes from his formative years when, as a ward of the state, his future was left to a system that struggled with his biracial identity. He chronicles his life experiences in his 2012 memoir, A Chance in the World, An Orphan Boy, A Mysterious Past, and How He Found a Place Called Home. This book is now in its 4th printing and has been translated into Chinese. Steve's relentless journey to overcome obstacles, find his home, locate his biological family, and right the wrongs of his parents' past continues to touch audiences worldwide. Steve's unconventional journey to corporate America has had profound influence on the lives of others, inspiring young people, teachers, executives, and caregivers to embrace adversity and believe in possibility. His powerful story has been featured in People magazine and many other media outlets throughout the country. Please welcome Steve Pemberton.
Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. I shouldn't take exception to the fact that you shared it, since I'm the one who actually wrote it. I should have added to my request to shrink that picture of me. I don't mean to scare you good people like that. I don't have to talk too long before it's apparent that I am not from the Midwest. See, I hear some nods of approval already. So I moved here about 3.5 years ago, and it shocked me when people would say, well, you're not from here. And it wasn't a question. And I said, well, no, I'm not. I'm from Boston. And the response to this was to laugh. And I couldn't figure out the laughter. I felt like I was watching a movie. I'm a clown. I amuse you. Until someone enlightened me. They said, well, look, the minute that you start talking, it's really apparent that you are from Boston. So I'm going to slip in a few pop de cars and Harvard Yard. Well, if you hear a Boston accent, I want you to feel its full effect. I don't think you should be cheating. So, you know, it is on too many levels of count an honor to be here with you, to hear the good work of the United Way. I don't know about you, but your travels, wherever they take you, people that you meet, I think there's a quiet whisper happening in our country today, and we're wondering whether or not we're getting this right. We're wondering about the daily deluge of cynicism and me first kind of behaviors. If it leads kind of culture, becoming increasingly disconnected as we are becoming more technologically connected. Because we know at some core level that these aren't the things, these aren't the attributes that drove our nation. It doesn't help explain, and certainly is not leading way for us to talk about our history. We know that these aren't the principles that drove the suffrage movement, the civil rights movement, allowed us to overcome depression and world wars. I look at some of the things that are posted on social media today, and I wish they had a don't care button on its site. Because this is my reaction to a lot of the things that I see. Fundamentally, at my core, I really don't care. So when I see what so many of the sponsors here today are doing, not simply sponsoring, but standing in the gap, delivering some kind of impact, even though we're not always clear the effect that it's going to have. That's who we are. That's who, I'd argue, we've always been. And it's a story that we need to tell increasingly so. And in the final analysis, isn't that really what it's all about? A story of organizations, of us as individuals, of us as communities, fundamentally so. And so we all, in some way, shape, or form, have a story. We think we know someone's story based on what we see. We take quick snapshots of one another, most times unintentionally so, and we think based on that simple picture, here is what we see. But the truth of the matter is that all of us have a story, and none of us look like that story. And that's important because it implies, certainly that you have one, but whatever it is, it requires us to look further and dig just a little bit deeper. So my life today is really centered around these wonderful people. My wife Tanya, of 17 years, and our children, Quinn, Vaughn, and Kennedy. Kennedy is unequivocally, unabashedly daddy's girl. Precocious, all of them are in their own way. Kennedy, in fact, when she heard one time that I was going to be the only man speaking at a women's conference, says to me, "I know you're the greatest daddy in the whole world, but couldn't they find a girl?" Vaughn's life's philosophy is jump and then figure it out on the way down. I asked him one time why he kept pursuing something even though he was getting the same result. I said, "Well, Vaughn, you know, what do you think is going to happen differently?" He gave me a one-word answer: something. And Quinn, who is the oldest, is certainly one of the nicest people that I know. So my life isn't any different than yours. It is a blur of meetings and travel, and practices, and somewhere in between there you try and actually rest. Harder to come by. But this for me is actually how things began. This dashing little fella here is me at the age of 7 years old. I did not see this picture until 5 years ago, when in the course of writing my book and doing some research, I requested my case file, and this picture came tumbling out. And amazingly, I remembered this picture because it is the only one that exists of me in my childhood. So I can tell you exactly where I was. I was at Mountainwood Park in New Bedford, Massachusetts. My hands are holding a swing. You can see them outstretched. You can also see that I had the affliction that for so many of us raised in the 1970s, we all suffered from this. It's called the giant collar virus. So you laughed at someone who had pictures with the giant collar. And I'm equally proud now to report that I have since grown a neck. But that picture is hiding a lot of things. My smile is hiding the fact that by this age I have been in so many foster homes that I've lost count. They are a blur of places, open doors, closed doors, looks of pity and empathy, labels assigned to me, including that I didn't have a chance in the world. I am called ugly and broken and beyond repair. All these years later, I'm still trying to figure out how anybody could think that I'm ugly. I know you folks out there can't see, but you're just going to have to take the word of the people up front. But no child is ugly. No child is broken, and no child is beyond repair. I look forward to the holidays not because of Santa Claus, because the homes that I'm in, it's clear to me that Santa doesn't come to see me. But I still find identity in other things that are around me, including this guy. You know who this is. It's okay, we can date ourselves. That's the little drummer boy. So I look forward to the holidays because I would get to see the little drummer boy who I saw in him so much of myself. And I also really, really like these guys too. Those of you who are a little bit younger, you might not know that this is the heat miser and the freeze miser. And we won't, those of us who are a little bit older, we won't actually sing the song for you. But we do know it. We do know it. So for me, growing up in that community, which has these amazing historic roots in the historic struggle that is freedom, equality, access, and opportunity. New Bedford, Massachusetts is the first place that Frederick Douglass lived, and he escaped from the South. You see the movie Glory, members of the 54th and 55th Regiment came from New Bedford, Massachusetts. So these are all stories that I grew up with, but I am in the midst of my own struggle and my own battle to find a sense of purpose and place and home and connection. Now, I have a secret weapon, though, that almost nobody knows, and it's that I love to read. I was then and I am today, a ferocious reader. And I would read anything that I could get my hands on, didn't matter what it was, didn't matter if I liked the subject or not. I just loved to read. And reading was so important to me because it gave me a sense of vision and values. So it gave me some practical skills, but vision, values, and a sense that the existence that I was in today, not everybody lived like this. And most importantly, I wasn't going to live this way forever either. So the books I read, I would insert myself into those stories, and I would become those characters. I have my own rules. They're hard because of the situation that I'm in. One is risk anything to read. Risk anything. It doesn't matter if you get in trouble. You know, that might sound strange for me to say to you. The rules of this one particular foster home that I spent over 13 years in is that I cannot get caught reading in your presence. That doesn't make any sense to you now, and didn't make any sense to me then. But still I risked. I was willing to risk it all. My favorite place to read is that spot right there, that wall. That's where I would read just about every summer day. You can see at its northern end there's a flat spot. The rest of it's rough and craggy. I couldn't sit there, but I would sit right there in that shade every day and read. And that's where I'm sitting when I hear someone coming. Now, the other rule of this home was that I couldn't be seen talking to an adult, because they were afraid if you spent any time talking to me, then you would see the truth in my eyes as to what was unfolding in this home. And so I would have to drop my eyes. I couldn't make eye contact with you. So when I hear someone coming, I am petrified. I know that this is an adult. Your senses are highly attuned when you're in the midst of a daily struggle like that. And the sidewalk in front of this wall is actually not a sidewalk at all, but crunchy gravel, so I can hear these feet coming. And now I'm really saying, you know, keep walking, keep walking. And the feet don't hear this. In fact, they stop right in front of me. And then they start talking to me, and I'm too afraid to look up. And the feet say, well, what are you reading there? And I held up my book in like a defense mechanism. And the feet say, well, weren't you reading that last week? And shouldn't you be done by now? This astounded me because I didn't know how in the world this person, who I'd never seen before, knew that I was reading the same book over and over again. And so the only thing I can say is, well, I finish, and then I go back to the beginning, and I hope I see new things. Feet say nothing, they walk away. Well, later on at night, there's a knock at the door. And the person says, when the door is answered by someone else in the home, the person said, is Steve there? And that too jumped out at me, because people rarely use my name when they talk to me. So I not only recognized the voice, even though I hadn't seen the person, I knew somehow that she thought something of me just by using my name. Just by using my name. So I come running around the corner, and I almost ran into her, but I don't, because she's holding something, and it's a box of books, which she brought me not only that evening, but would bring me many days throughout the remainder of my time in that foster home. Most days I never saw her. I still remember the enormous fear. I don't quite have the vocabulary to express to you what it's like to wake up every single day wondering if today's the day that you're going to die. So to live in that fear every day, you've got to find some reason to live forward to the next day. So many days when I would come to that home, I would see the box of books. So I knew she had been there, and I knew that she saw something. I'd lost contact with her over the years. We say sometimes that all it takes is one adult. That's not true. All it takes is one interaction. Use someone's name, stop, and give a box of books, paint a school. Small interactions can change the arc of a life. So I am ferociously emboldened by my love of reading. It makes me well on my path to what I want to be. I want to be a detective. That's my deal. And see, I want to be a detective so I can figure out how it is that I, as a young black boy of light complexion, blue eyes, a blonde afro, and a Polish last name, that, believe me, that's a mystery. When you don't have anybody around you to tell you where all of that came from. So that's what I want to be. You remember the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and Alfred Hitchcock and Three Investigators, Encyclopedia Crimes. I love mystery. That was my deal. And I was going to be a detective. Now, that's my elementary school, where all of my dreams for what I wanted to be were resting in that place. And that little fella right there with his arms folded is me. And Scott and Christy, when I saw the pictures of the younger children, I thought, that's me. That's me. And not only is that me, but that's you too. That's you too. So because I love to read so much, I am a spelling bee champ. My classmates know that we probably shouldn't even have the spelling bee this year because I'm going to win. But there's one particular time, remember spelling bees, you get the word over here and the judges are over there. So I would get the word, I would spell it correctly, and you know, if you got it wrong, the ding would go off. Well, I never had to hear that, fortunately, but every time I spell the word right, I'm looking over at the judges, because there's this one judge, and every time I spell the word right, she's smiling. So I would spell the word, and then I would kind of... And then it got to the point as the competition progressed that I would spell it and look. I was looking forward more to her reaction than spelling the word correctly. And this is that spelling bee judge. And that was her smile. That's exactly how she looked. A smile. I still remember that smile, the first time that I ever saw it. So off to New Bedford High School I go. I am ferociously emboldened now. I am going to college, and there's nothing anyone's going to do to stop me. I'm willing to, again, risk it all, because I know that that's going to help set a different course for my life. And even though I've got to take on this family to do it, these people who have won awards for taking in foster children, who have held up a veneer and a mask that has fooled virtually everyone, I am isolated and alone in taking them on, largely because those entrusted with my care don't see. They don't see. I am told about this Upward Bound program by a classmate who said, if you want to get to college, go to this program. And you go there is there's staff people there who will help you apply, and they will help you get to college. I said, great. I walk in, and who is there but the spelling bee judge? And she's still smiling. She had remembered me from 7 years prior. She said, you're the spelling bee champ. I smiled back at her. So that too, I hadn't forgotten. Now, the stakes are higher. I'm trying to get to college. The family's trying to take it away from me. They call Ruby Dotton, the director of that Upward Bound program, the spelling bee judge, and they try to pull me away. She sends me to meet with this man. And I have to make my case. For the first time, I have to say to someone, what's unfolding in this home is a lot more than what it appears to be. If you take away the program from me, if you are gone, if Ruby's gone, I have no safety net now. And I'm left in their clutches. I remember that meeting too, because I remember how high the stakes were. And when he says to me, we have decided that you stay, that you can stay in the program, I am so relieved. And I walk outside of the office, and I just slide my back against the wall in enormous relief, because the dream of getting to college is still possible. It's still possible. And that's where I am when I hear him say to another counselor, I don't have any children, but if I had a son, I would want him to be just like Steve. I remember that too. As I am in relentless pursuit of college, things really fracture, and I manage to escape the foster home. I have no place to go. I leave there 2 days after Christmas. I'm 16, I'm male, I'm African American, it's the holidays, I'm about to age out of the foster care system, so there's no place for somebody like me. And I remember sitting with my social worker, calling family after family after family after family, and each time the answer is no. And finally my social worker says, well, do you know anyone? And I remember thinking, well, I thought that was your job. But they had no plan for me. And so when he asked me that, I said, well, there's this teacher who I heard say something really nice about me. I think he likes me. So we call him, and that is with whom I stay for the last year of high school. I'm still going to college. I can't afford college. He tells me, apply for as many scholarships as you can get your hands on. Remember the big book of scholarships at Pemberton? You come home and you flip through it, you try to find which one's fit for you. I was so desperate, I applied for anything that I could get my hands on. And with his help, this is one that I applied for in particular. So, when I told him that I wanted to apply for it, and he actually encouraged me, and he said, you know, we were debating, and I said, they're going to reject me. He says, for girls only. He says, yeah, I know. He goes, but you know, apply anyway. So I did, and they rejected me. So what we then decided to do was we wrote him back and said, are you sure? They wrote me back, yes, we're very sure. So I was told no a lot, but I was told yes a lot more, which is how I wound up with a full scholarship to Boston College. So a new day begins for me. I am loving college, but I'm walking around with this hole because I still don't know where I've come from, don't know who I belong to, don't know how it is that I am here at my college graduation. I'm about to graduate, and I'm here by myself. As I'm sitting there at commencement and I hear the lions roar and the stampede of approval that comes from families, I'm very aware that when my name is called, there's two things, in fact, I know. When the name Steve Clackowitz is called, there's two things I know. One, there's going to be no roar of approval for me because there's no one here. And the other thing I know is that that name, Steve Clackowitz, is not my name. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't fit. And so now I double down on my efforts to find my biological family, and amazingly, I do. It was a long journey and process. The entire time, I'm not aware that I was still holding this dream that I would meet my mother and father one day, that I would be able to sit down and talk with them. I could ask my mother how she chose the name Steve. I could ask my father why he didn't tell me about me. I thought I'd be able to have those conversations, but the fact of the matter was that they were gone by then. Their lives were brief, deeply flawed, and very tragic. And that too, I don't quite know how to express what that's like to find your parents and lose them in the same day. And all you're left with is the memories of others who tell you who they were and how they were and perhaps what they could have been. I still carry their stories with me, but I can't talk to them in the way that I had hoped for, the way that I had wished for. It just simply wasn't in the cards. But I did learn enough about them to see that they were no different than us in a lot of ways. They had hopes and dreams. They were young ones. This is my mother at the same age as my daughter, when she, no doubt, had the same dreams and visions, aspirations that Kennedy has. That is my father. If you look really close, it's clear he just got into trouble for something. That is his mother, Mary Cabral. And I recognize the look on his face because that's the look that I see on the face of Quinn and Vaughn all the time. But what you can't see in that picture is that just a year after this picture is taken, Mary Cabral passes away of heart disease at the age of 40. She leaves behind 13 children who are scattered to the winds. And the truth is, the Pemberton family has never recovered from that singular event. So when you think about the work that the United Way does, and we as corporations, the commitments that we make to our communities, whose lives do you think we're touching? Well, it's people like my mother, Marion Murphy, my father, Kenny Pemberton, it changes the arc of lives and generations, allows us to tell new and different stories. You know who this is. This is the spelling bee judge. Isn't she smiling the same way that she was when I first saw her? And now she's really smiling because all of that love of reading. This college student who had to handwrite his papers because his professors never believed that he was capable of writing this way. Well, all of this translates into me writing my own book. And so she is there at the book signing, and now she's really proud because the spelling bee champion is now an author. You also know who these folks are. You know who these folks are. That is the woman who brought me books. Who I would meet some 35 years after that small act of kindness that changed the arc of my life. And I was able to say to her, thank you for what you had done. She's 80 years old. She too had remembered me. You're the boy who sat on the wall who loved to read. And I asked her, well, why did you do that? Why did you stop that day? She's a very humble woman. She has been in that community for the last 60 years. Hasn't been on a plane that time. She carries none of the titles that many of us in this room have. She's never worked for the organizations that we have. And so when I asked her about that, she said, well, it was something that my mother told me to do, which was give from where you are with what you have. And all I really had to give you was a box of books that my sons were no longer reading. Can you imagine the power of something that you did some 35 years prior, which you were expecting no reward, needed no reward, seeking nothing, no public recognition, comes back to you. Sometimes it takes until you're 80 years old to see the effect that you have on a life. I had her name as, at least I remembered it, as Levin, and the only reason I called her Mrs. Levin over the years was because that was the name on the inside of the books. And I had it right, because that is Claire Levin, and that is her husband, Fred. And as fate would have it, she has 3 boys, Howie, Jerry, and Steve. So this you know too. This is the high school teacher, Mr. Sykes, who took me in for my last year of high school. Or, as my children would say, that is Grandpa John. Because that is who he is to them. And as you can see, some things have not changed. As mischievous as ever. But you can see why a lot of the traditional labels and categories don't fit. And what it requires of all of us to bring together all of these stories. In the absence of any family and true community, you do, I think, what's required of any of us. You just build. That young man there to my left is my biological brother, Ben Murphy, who I didn't meet until I was 25 years old. We are as opposite as two people can be. He's more the surfer kind of guy. He was actually surfing one day, and he dropped me a note, and he said, you know, just came in from the waves. I was very envious. And he said, you know, sun was setting and waves were crashing. I was just thinking about you. And I shot him back a note, and I said, we didn't have any say over whether we could be brothers. Nature determined that. But we've had every say as whether or not we can be friends. And I'm really glad to call you mine. This is the Pemberton family today. It's not perfect, because the truth of the matter is that family, as you well know, is absolutely and unequivocally not perfect. But you make do. Now here's what I didn't know, is that the entire time that I had been searching for family, biological family, I had it all along in these people and in these places who did small things. We might deem to be ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Small decisions made. Someone stops to give you books. Somebody as great as taking you in when you've got no place to go. See, my definition of family, I inherently understand a family doesn't always look like you. And you can see why I might say that when I look at all of these people. There is nothing, to the young people here in the room, I see a few of you, there's nothing special about me. There's nothing extraordinary about me. These are the people who, in my heart and mind, are extraordinary. They're the reasons why I'm here. Did I have a good dose of resilience? I absolutely did. So did my father. And our lives took very different paths. So what was the difference between he and I? Well, the difference were these people. They were the difference, ultimately. And because of them, I got to do and build the one thing and the only thing that I ever really wanted, and that was my own family. That's what I wanted to build. That's what I wanted to create. So you can see that the stories, the judgments that we make about people, if you look a little bit harder, you see that there's a lot more to all of us than just that initial impression that you have. Requires us to look further, requires us to look just a little bit harder, but those stories are there. And mine came to me when I was reading my case file. And a social worker saw me playing, and she said, I get the sense that even at 5 years old, Steve has some really deep thoughts about family. And how right she was. Because the entire time, that's what I was trying to do. It might seem odd for me to say to you that I think life is fair, and that I wouldn't change a single step of it for the place that I am today and where I am now. But when you look at this picture, you can see why I would say that. That's the path I had to travel to get to Tanya and Quinn and Vaughn and Kennedy. I'd do it all over again. We are standing in the very spot that Tanya and I met some 17 odd years ago, when her friends, who are not too happy with the fact that I am disrupting the girls' weekend. But I know that I have met somebody magical. And so her friends say to her, you've been talking to this guy for 24 hours and you don't even know his name, his last name. And she says, you know what, you're right, I don't really know your last name. And in the hubris of youth, I say to her, you tell your friends that my last name is Pemberton, and one day that is going to be your name too. That's right, I said it. But I knew. I had that sense. Maybe it's a survivor skill that you acquire, being able to sense authenticity and sincerity, and people who are in their spirit, genuinely interested in being of service, in connecting to one another. It's important that the United Way continue to do the work that you do and in the way that you do it, to serve as a buffer for, at times, the cynicism and hopelessness that's constantly in front of us. In my world and in my experiences, I've learned to make a distinction between hoping and believing. And I understand hope's power. I understand its universality. I understand that it can elevate us. But I have very little room for hope. And though that might seem impolite to say, I had a lot of people who hoped for me, who wanted something different for me. But all they did was hope. Hope requires you to stand there and wait for something to happen. But the fact of the matter is that, for me, people didn't always believe. See, when you believe, you will then do something. You will take an action. You will do something on someone else's behalf. Not because you just hope for them and you want their situation to get better, but because you believe they have a right to it. You believe that they have a right to literacy. You believe they have a right to safe communities. You believe they have a right to a prosperous life and career. And because you believe that, you too will risk whatever's required and whatever's necessary. Because that is who we are, and it's who we've always been. I know you come here to the breakfast, and you will move off into a day of, as I will, of meetings and schedules and travels and all those things. But as you do so, I hope that my life story, which I always felt obligated and responsible to tell. I refuse to retreat. When I first wrote the book, so many people say, you're so courageous for writing the story. I didn't get this. I didn't understand. What do you mean courageous? What they were really saying was, if I had come from all of that, I would say nothing. I say nothing at all. And I thought, well, that would be to surrender. And I am not in the surrendering business. I don't retreat. Because there are young people whose lives we know we can affect, that we are affecting. We need to know that So I've told my story, true, but I've told some of your stories too. And if I haven't told your story, I've told the story of your mother or father, an aunt or uncle, brother or sister. Young people need to hear our struggle. They need to know that they too can emerge on the other side of that adversity. That they didn't create it, they didn't ask for it, but we can help guide them and direct them. So let's get out of our own sanctuaries and touch and change the arc of a life. Let's continue that great work. It's an honor to be here with you this morning. Thank you.